Welcome back to the Lords of Lore Podcast. I'm Matt.
I'm Will.
And I'm also Matt.
Nice. Matt, welcome to the main show.
Thank you for having me on again.
Of course. We got a lot of exciting things to talk about. But if people want to check you out on this channel, before we did a review of episodes 7 through 9 of Vox Machina, nearing the finale of that series. So we'll have to get your thoughts on that at a later date.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm very excited. But yeah, let's get into some of our regular scheduled programming. I guess I'll kick us off. I wanted to talk about something I only recently discovered, but it's been a long time, not in the making, but kind of. Anyways, we all are here, the three of us, big Lord of the Rings fans. Were you guys aware that there was a planned sequel to the Lord of the Rings?
I did not know about that. What?
Yeah. Will, you're aware of this?
Yeah. The Shadow Darkens or something like that.
New Shadow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I saw this as a YouTube video, and I can't remember what the channel was called. I think the Nerd of the Rings or something. Maybe I'll put a link in the description below. Really great video, goes into depth on what the story would be, and talks a lot about why Tolkien decided to ultimately not go through with it. And I thought it was a really interesting thing because basically, if people haven't seen the video, I'll summarize it here, is that, it takes place, I think, a century after Aragorn has passed away.
Wow.
And that whole time there's been peace in Middle Earth. And then one of the scenes that really stuck out to me was it follows this book follows the character of, if you guys remember from the book, there's a character that helps out, I think, Pippin while he's in the White City. His name starts with a B, but I think it's his son or his grandson who the story follows. And he's walking through Minas Tirith, I think, or one of the other cities in Gondor. And he comes across a group of kids who are playing as orcs. They're pretending to be orcs and fighting each other. And, there's a group of kids who are going around doing petty criminal stuff and calling themselves orcs. And for him, it's a shocking thing because it's wow, these kids really don't understand the severity of what happened. They're making fun of it.
Yeah.
Which I think is sort of like an analog for Tolkien, after World War II, seeing even something like wargaming, which Warhammer comes from and stuff like that. Or just modern movies that sort of romanticize World War II in a way. I feel like it's sort of like an analog for that, but the basic theme that keeps sort of reoccurring is that even if the ultimate evil is defeated, there will always be a new shadow, so to speak, which I think eventually in his writing process became something that was so dark and drab to write about. Just reflecting the human condition of, we can never weed out evil. And even if there's long times of peace, they'll soon be followed by times of war, because this is the cycle we're sort of stuck in. And so
it's pretty depressing.
Yeah. But as a creator, when you finish a work on such a positive note, like how the Lord of the Rings ends, it's sort of it's one of those things. Obviously there's a lot of stories, but it's one of those things where you don't want to take those warm fuzzies away from your audience, because this is, because we're stuck in this cycle of human history where, up until now, we don't really know how to break that cycle. To take away something that does, because the story stops there, I feel is kind of depressing. When people want to look at the world and find sides of light, they might look to something like Lord of the Rings and be like, well, that ended good, so maybe things in real life can too. And to write a story that takes away from that, I think was really hard for a creator to do. But I feel it's also hard for creators to let something go and not add to it. And we see this a lot. Star Wars is another thing the three of us are big fans of here. Star Wars, I feel this is these symptoms are very present when we talk about people making prequels, because then we're don't ruin the mystery and those warm fuzzies. But I feel it's sequels that are much more damaging to the overall property, in that a lot of people don't want to see Luke Skywalker fail. We have to see him overcome and succeed. To come back to it later and be all of that was for naught, he ended up failing anyways, it's kind of difficult. And it's not something like, I think it's realistic because that's life. And so when I look at stories like sequels in that way, I try to look at it from that perspective. Like, I want to see where these characters would actually end up if we're, you know, being immersed in this world. But at the same time, it's like, do I want to know that my heroes just became average people or ended up failing or, you know, overlooked a lot of things that they maybe shouldn't have and led to further chaos? It's kind of like, I don't know where to balance my love of wanting to see more in a world versus when is the story finished. Do you guys have any initial thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I definitely agree with that aspect of it's hard for writers to give up on things sometimes. I mean, like, George R. R. Martin basically added so much that he just couldn't finish his books anymore.
Right.
Like, he just couldn't figure out where to go. And like, people's complaints with stuff like the Solo movie from Star Wars is that it's like, guys, it's already a character that we love, and part of the love for this character is the mystery behind them and like the roguish charm that they have. And we didn't really need stuff like that explained. I'm not saying the Solo movie is bad. I think Solo movie is pretty fun.
I like it too.
slight off tangent, but like, it's just that kind of thing where I could definitely see Tolkien going, you know what, there's an opportunity to sour the way that my incredibly successful trilogy has gone and just backing off. And also that concept of going from a nice happy ending where like the ending of Lord of the Rings is, even just in the movies, is like a tearjerker, man.
Yeah, for
Pippin, like all the hobbits in Minas Tirith and Aragorn's like, you bow to no one.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, oh my God, the tears, they're flowing. And to immediately be like, 1,000 years later, nah, it's back in the shit again, guys. Like, it's all bad. You'll never escape this kind of darkness. It makes sense because power is a vacuum. So something leaves, something will take its place eventually. It's a cycle, but yeah, I'm not upset that we didn't get a sequel series after Lord of the Rings. And definitely not.
Yeah, well said. What about you, Will?
Yeah. Did you come up with this topic because did you see like the trailer that was released on the weekend?
Yeah, that's going to be a segment for the next segment here.
We're getting there. We'll get there.
Yeah. Yeah. I like, if you want to have like, I would say just from all the adaptations I've seen, like in the recent year or 2 years, I think just like if you want to have it in the same universe, just make completely different characters is how, like for example, like The Witcher, like like if you're not going to follow the characters as intended, then you're just making fan fiction, which is like fine. Just I guess just do it with somebody else. Like oh shit. Sorry, I knocked my thing over. Like for example, like I think The Mandalorian is good because it's a completely new character, like albeit with a few, I guess, like cameos from ones that we know. But even then, aside from one person at the end of season 2, they're all people that we don't really know it too well. Like it's just completely fresh new story, which is like I'm fine with.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
I think like Star Wars is always a weird one because we're dealing with like a very long timeline, and so something like The Mandalorian isn't technically a sequel. Technically, it's a prequel, depending on where we're looking at it from.
Yeah, like which era of movies you want to look at. Like,
so like even something like Boba Fett is like it's the next arc we're getting of Boba Fett, but technically to the most recent releases of Star Wars chronologically, it is a prequel. So Star Wars is kind of weird in that way. And I guess like with prequels, I have less of an issue with it because for me, it's like as the creator, this was always in your head. Where these people came from, you always had like at least vague ideas of where they may have came from, or you had created the character. So in your mind, it makes sense that they came from this and became who they are by the time we're seeing them in the original work, right? So something like Solo, like you're saying, Matt, is like, I have no problems with Solo. I actually enjoy the film. But beyond that, it's like, I like if that's where the writers saw him coming from, I don't really have an issue with that. You know, Star Wars runs into some tough water too, wherein you have multiple writers and stuff like that. But you know, when we talk about like Lawrence Kasdan, like he's responsible, you know, in part for the Solo we love. So I feel like he has the, you know, the should get the respect to tell that story. But when we talk about sequels, it's like, for me, it's like, as the creator, you had a definitive end to your thing, and now you're adding on.
Yeah.
So for me, like, sorry, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, sequel. I think what makes sequels bad is just when people retcon things.
Yes.
And it's like things that have just kind of like been established for a long time, such as hand shooting first, etc. So
yeah,
like I think that's part of what makes the Marvel movies really good, is that they're very consistent, and while there's maybe some minor inconsistencies from time to time, the majority of the last 17 years or something of movies has basically all been one streamlined story process that's evolved throughout time, but
right,
everybody knew where it was supposed to be going, and so they could work together. Whereas with Tolkien, it's really hard because he's not alive anymore, so he doesn't get to voice his thoughts on that kind of stuff. And for a prequel thing with Tolkien, he's famous for writing a ton of history for his books, which is cool. Whereas sequel stuff, it really is him having to just add more and more and more, and sometimes that can really sour things. I just think, especially if they tried to make a sequel now, it would be really poorly received, probably.
I would not. And again, like, the thing with the Tolkien thing is, like, a lot of what's come out since he passed was, obviously made by Christopher Tolkien, but based off of notes and projects that Tolkien had planned to release at one point. So those don't bug me. I think that's it's a separate thing. Like, for me, like, my overall love of like the Tolkien verse has those two things in it, but they're in separate sort of Venn diagram portions.
100%.
But I think if someone didn't feel that way, if they were all in the same Tolkien verse for somebody, that's completely fine too. But when we talk about sequels, it's like, I think there's two ways of looking at it, right? I'm trying to look at it from like the creator adding on and why it might feel right or feel like it's not the right time to do that. But then we also have like the Hollywood engine of, this is a successful thing. Its name alone will make us money if we make something. So, then that's why we're getting sequels to even something like Star Wars. It's not like, those sequels are made because they make people money. Whereas like Tolkien writing the new Shadow, it feels less that way. I mean, obviously there's a business element involved in an author putting out a book, but it feels less capitalistic, I guess, than Hollywood being like, oh, what the fuck was popular in the 80s? Let's put that out again.
City.
Or like, I feel like in the last 5 years, we've gotten like a lot of requels, which is like a reboot and a sequel all in one.
The soft reboot, basically.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, we made 5 sequels, but we recognize they all suck. So here's a direct sequel to the original. Things like, I think Halloween did this, Terminator did this recently.
Matrix kind of.
Yeah, Matrix as well. And it's like, I don't have a problem with that, because I like that. Okay, here's some new creators who really love the old thing, and they're going to make their sequel now, and it's canon. It's not just fanfic. But at the same time, it's like, stick to your fucking guns, If you made those 5 movies, you better stick by them. And so I feel like Tolkien being like, actually, I'm not going to write this, because the message that it conveys is not one I feel is present in the Lord of the Rings, and I don't want to lose that through line. I think is a sort of like a really tough thing for a creator to do, but I'm like glad that he made that decision, because I think it lessens how important the end of some projects are. And yeah, again, Star Wars for me is one of those that didn't do that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Naruto and Boruto, but for me, like, see, this is where I think people are gonna disagree with me here. Like, I love Naruto, Shippuden and everything. I haven't got into Boruto as much, but like, I've seen the movie, I've seen the first maybe 30 episodes, and it's actually a sequel that I love, because for me as a viewer, it hits on the elements that I feel make a sequel realistic, and that this idealized version of this person we ended the story with, seeing them 20 years later changes our perspective on them, but we also know what they've been through. So when you see Boruto, speak to Naruto as if he's an absentee father, and you're like, you fucking little shit, you have no idea. it's
nothing.
but that's life. Like, even like as youth, like we don't know what our parents have been through. And if we say something disrespectful, they might hit you with the you don't know what I did, like I brought you into this world type of shit, Whereas like with Naruto and Boruto, like that relationship is so tense because it's like we as the audience, we can get angry with Boruto for being like, oh man, you just don't fucking understand. But then we can also see it from Boruto's perspective and like, yeah, you are an absent father because you have to do these things because you're the person with the power. But so that for me is a sequel that works. I can't speak to the whole breadth of Boruto because I haven't seen it all, but that works for me better than Star Wars because it's like Naruto didn't end on a point where it was like, this is a problem-free person. We just see him fix a certain problem he's dealing with, not save the entire world. And I think Naruto even sets up the story arcs that Boruto eventually takes on with the new villain sort of antagonistic force. So yeah, I think it can be done. But obviously, Matt, like you feel differently about that. So what do you feel is the difference there?
I mean, like I watched Boruto up to like episode 120 or something. And the idea of having an all-powerful character like Naruto present, where you've already seen everything that he's gone through and his growth to being what he is at the time of Boruto, where he's the Hokage and like literally the most powerful, well, supposedly the most powerful ninja on the planet. There's only so many times you can have a super big bad threat show up and still feel like there's any risk because you just know at the end of the day, Naruto's going to show up and smack someone around for 30 seconds, basically. I mean, Star Wars did an okay job at trying to avoid some of that, but they did it by like ruining Luke's character for some people. So it was like, well, I guess this is why Luke can't save the day again because he's retired. But
yeah,
I mean, I don't have a super huge issue with how Luke was handled in The Last Jedi. Like, I'm more okay with the concept of someone being like, look, I tried so hard time and time again to like rebuild what Ben taught me, to rebuild what Yoda taught me. Like all of these things he's got. Like he in the Battlefront 2 campaign, you see Luke going on an adventure through the galaxy, finding out like old Jedi texts and shit. In Last Jedi, you see him with those old Jedi texts. So like, and in The Mandalorian, and spoilers for Book of Boba Fett. Am I like I'm good to talk about that kind of stuff?
You don't go specifics, but yeah.
But I mean, like you do see again a part of a journey.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I get it. You've been burned so many times at this point in time that like you've just kind of thrown a fit and given up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just wouldn't even know what a Lord of the Rings sequel would look like.
Yeah.
Like in the Age of Men with no elves, like it would be so radically different. I don't know. It'd be strange.
It's very interesting. And I do, again, I'll link to that video below, but I do recommend it because the story itself is super fascinating, but it is so dark. And the Lord of the Rings, especially like the films, they're dark too, right? Like impending doom and everything. But there's a sort of levity to it where when you pull back, it's like these are elves and giants and orcs, So, but when you're dealing with this is just men and the reoccurring inherent evil in some men is unavoidable. That concept alone doesn't lend itself well to.
It's too real.
The same world that the elves and men thing came from before. When you have different series where it's only men or follows men more closely than Lord of the Rings, say, then I think that's appropriate. Like, but I don't know. It's going back to The Last Jedi. I just want to clarify. I also love that that's where Luke's character ends up. I just think the execution is god awful, and there's like the lightsaber throw is.
I was gonna say you didn't even throw the lightsaber, man. Like
blue milk.
It's your dad's lightsaber, man. Chill.
But I go back to like what I was saying about Naruto, right? Like, I love that that's a realistic evolution of that character. Like failure sometimes is the only option, and he failed, and this is how he dealt with it, which he, by his actions in that movie, we see he believes was the wrong way. Eventually he comes to a new realization and changes his approach, and that's how that goes. But I still feel like the execution was flawed, and therefore you lose a lot of people when it's not crisp the way it should be. Will, do you have any thoughts there, or I'm going to move into a question for you guys?
Yeah, let's get into questions.
Okay, so I have a list here of things, and there's a lot. I can't cover all the projects or whatever in this small list I have, but I'll give you guys some time to think now. If you could pick a series that has a definitive end and make a sequel of it, which ones would you choose? So there's a couple. I'll just list off while you guys try to think of something. Obviously, the Zack Snyder DC universe comes to mind because that's something that got cut short. Where I think that would be a really interesting, like the end of the Justice League movie. I thought I just want to see that. Do I think it would be financially viable? No, I don't at all. I understand why that isn't going to happen, and that's fine. I want to see more of Detective Pikachu. I want more Pokemon World. Onward was a cool Disney movie, which I'd like to see a sequel of. And I'll preface this next one with saying I think J.K. Rowling is an abomination. But I would be interested in seeing what's next for Harry Potter, the character, as long as J.K. Rowling was detached from the project all entirely.
Was there not a rumored Cursed Child movie happening?
Yeah. As far as I know right now, it's just a rumor. Again, it's not something I'll be patronizing if that person is attached to the project. Very valid. But just out of my curiosity and having that story sort of as part of my upbringing, I want to see in my sort of jaded adult mind the struggles that character would have to live through. And again, what's the next sort of evil that comes up? The Cursed Child to me is a cool concept of it being something that's a product of himself being the next thing. Things that I don't want to see sequels for that I constantly see online that people think they should get sequels. Inception does not need a fucking sequel. Shut up. V for Vendetta is one that I never want a sequel of. I have a bunch of others. Princess Mononoke might find itself on that list too, and a host of all others. But for you guys, is there any project you would like to see a sequel of that none exists for so far?
So this is like movie and TV show based,
or book or game or whatever the case is.
I mean, something that got a terrible first reception, the original Aragon movie, which a terrible movie. The books, however, unreal. I adored those books as a kid. The Inheritance series was awesome. I would definitely love them to try and at least revisit and reset, and then like at least try and get a second and third movie out of it. We'll see.
Now, would you like to see a sequel to the first movie, or you want a clean reboot, right?
I think I would actually rather a clean reboot. Okay, yeah. So purely just a sequel with an
ending. I think for me personally, it's getting, I guess, a sort of a prequel, but I'd like to see a sequel of Game of Thrones. Specifically, like I'd like to see, like, for example, like a descendant of like Jon Snow, but like set like 1,000 years into the future or something, and like see how like that might play out, because mostly throughout that entire timeline, I mean, just in general for Game of Thrones, is always fights eventually, like you said, Matt. It's powers of vacuum, right?
When I was talking about this prior to filming, Game of Thrones is one of the ones I listed as never wanting to see more past. I couldn't care less at this point. But
I do think that final season really killed that show for me. Like
that's why like it would have to be at least like 1,000 years. Time
see, but like you said before earlier, Will, if we're at that point where we're 1,000 years in the future of this medieval fantasy world, just make a new thing. Like the only reason of keeping it Game of Thrones is because Game of Thrones is an IP, you know? Whereas like if we're telling a completely new story and like the characters we knew from before are relevant at this point and the world is, bland medieval fantasy world, fucking just make a new one,
but that's like kind of like what I mean, like, because like all the characters that we've seen throughout, I guess, the show and the books in this supposed timeline would be like, they would just kind of like, their names would just been like faded to history, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like there have been like, oh yeah, there was a queen, but then she turned out to be a pretty bad person,
psychopath.
And then that's how they're just like referenced, and then just kind of life moves on. There's a new threat kind of thing.
It almost feels like the Elder Scrolls games where it's like, yeah, there was a guy once who did a thing, and you're like, that was me, but no one fucking cares anymore. It's like,
yeah. I guess also like maybe like the Watchmen.
That's a good one.
I didn't see the TV series, but my understanding is that was a prequel.
Yeah, prequel.
Yeah, and I think this was also supposed to be a one and done show as well.
Yes, I believe
they
so.
wanted the one season, and then that was like they were done with it.
Yeah.
I mean, Watchmen the movie, unreal, maybe underrated. I don't hear it talked about very often in terms of like top.
I think like upon initial release, much maligned.
I mean,
but director's cut and subsequent, longer releases, I think one of the best superhero films, if not in the top 10 for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, like, because that, like in the movie and the graphic novel, like one of the themes is like the next generation of heroes and stuff. And then, I mean, the whole point was to like end that cycle. But like, I'm sure in like the Watchmen universe, eventually there would be a new group of heroes. Like the cycle would just continue. Yeah, but I think that'd be like kind of cool, especially if like heroes are outlawed even more strictly, I guess.
Yeah,
I know in the comics they just rolled it over into the main DC timeline. Like,
yeah, we don't talk about that.
Dr. Manhattan erasing all the heroes' memories of
Wally.
Crazy
shit. Oh god.
Yeah.
See, this when sequels get out of hand.
Yeah, right.
That's like, how can we make more money? Yeah, I think that'll do it for this segment here. But speaking of Lord of the Rings, Matt, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, all right. The topic I brought was the Rings of Power trailer for today. Yeah, so I'm a pretty big Lord of the Rings fan. I think, like you were saying earlier, Matt, the current existing Tolkien productions basically are split into like two categories for me. You have on one side Lord of the Rings, which is like the dark, gritty, it's stands up super well because it was all with, makeup and shooting on scene and stuff like that. And then on the other side, you have like the lighthearted, bright, clean, The Hobbit trilogy, which is, honestly, it's almost more enjoyable for me to rewatch because it's a lot more fun. It's just more fun and lighthearted. Like it's just easier to get through.
Okay.
Like, parts of Lord of the Rings are like depressing, right? Like it's watching some of the characters struggle in Lord of the Rings is hard sometimes. Whereas The Hobbit, you really don't get that. It has its own problems. Don't get me wrong. Like we didn't need 4.5 hour extended cuts of The Hobbit. Like that was ridiculous. But and I think this Rings of Power is going to sit maybe even further on the side of the Hobbit movies, where I'm not entirely sure about my enjoyment yet because the teaser trailer really didn't show much plot wise off.
Yeah. It
just showed a bunch of old characters that at first glance you wouldn't recognize, but like Elrond is there, Galadriel is there, Gil-galad, one of the Elven kings, is there as well, and he was in, I think, Fellowship of the Ring as well. At least that's what the rumor is for his character. So it just, the trailer looks to very clearly use a lot of CG for their stuff, which is, for some of it, it's hard to blame them, right? Like you're not going to get
but for a trailer like
that's the thing, right? Like
that jumping scene, that person with the knife, and that's awful. That's really bad.
That's Galadriel doing that. That's supposed to be Galadriel doing that. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, man, you guys could have toned down a little bit of the CG, maybe. Obviously, you can't get Galadriel's actress to climb 300 foot up a wall of ice. Like clearly, we can't be doing that just for pure safety's sake. But I mean, like, you can get Tom Cruise climbing on like the Burj Khalifa, so like you can do something.
It's not even like that the CGI is bad. It's that I can see how they shot it. I can see that it's someone lying down on a flat surface and jumping over, and them not being able to blend it three-dimensionally is horrendous to me.
Yeah, right.
It was jarring.
They didn't have to deal with gravity in the same way when you're laying on your stomach versus actually hanging there.
And like you say, like I think I'm the same as you. When it comes to cinematic Lord of the Rings or cinematic Tolkien, Lord of the Rings is up on a pedestal for me.
It's perfection.
The Hobbit is something, honestly, I'd rather forget about because I feel like as per our last segment, we talk about a creator going back to something. Peter Jackson and What a Workshop team going back to Middle Earth and not giving it the same energy they gave to the original projects, I think is one of the cinematic fouls of the century. I think it's, I don't, it for me, I've not let it sort of take away from my appreciation of Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, but I can definitely see why people would. I feel similar about The Hobbit as I do that I think maybe older Star Wars fans felt about the prequels. But I don't want to shit on anyone who enjoys it like yourself, Matt, because like
It's a fun
it is
trip.
still Tolkien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more like I'm just happy to be back on Middle Earth type thing,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Like it had enough recognizability where it was like, yeah, this is Tolkien's world. Maybe it's not quite as much as I would like it to be streamlined like it was with Lord of the Rings, but I mean, you still have Ian McKellen playing Gandalf. You still have, you know, Elrond there in their like very recognizable selves. So it has enough continuity. I don't know if this trailer will have that much continuity for me to enjoy.
Yeah. Will, what were your first impressions of the trailer?
I think that's where, as soon as they aired that trailer, personally, I think that's when the fate of the Bengals was written out. they killed the home of football.
Oh my goodness.
I think I've said it before, like on previous, I guess, episodes, was that is like I'm fine with it being in that era. It's just I don't want to see like a Galadriel like 2.0.
Yeah, it's literally like everyone you said you didn't want to see in this show shows up in the trailer.
Yeah, I know. So I was like, man, what the fuck?
Like, it's a really cool time period in Lord of the Rings. Like, I know that there's a lot of other stuff they could have made cool stories about, but Celebrimbor creating the rings and handing them out and seeing how Sauron like tricks almost everyone in power in the world is a super cool concept.
Right.
But I mean, we don't need to be focusing on Galadriel. We don't need to focus on Elrond. Like, we know who those characters are. Like, you have original characters from this time period you should probably be focusing more on.
Right. And I think that's the issue too. And I think that was the issue with The Hobbit is like, we have these iconic characters and we want to create that continuity. So instead of having Middle Earth serve as the continuous thing, it's like, we need to bring back these characters and highlight them, which I think is a mistake. And I think it's going to be the mistake that for me, like we've talked about this show maybe 3 or 4 times on this podcast, and we've never had anything good to say about it. And that hasn't changed for me. I feel like super negative, and I don't want to be, because like I want to see more fantasy shows and I want to see more Tolkien in live action. But for me, this trailer or teaser trailer, whatever you want to call it, every concern I had with this show beforehand has just been confirmed. Like the aesthetic tones do not match. Like I see Elrond and I'm like, is that some, like, not even that it's a different actor, I don't care about that, but it's just the armor, the like, I don't know, just the wear and tear of the world, which makes sense because pre-war time, whatever, but it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings. It feels like a different universe. And I know it's not going to sync up perfectly with the Peter Jackson verse, but it's just jarring for me. And so like it's not a reboot because it's a prequel, but I don't know, it's very strange.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like I guess like when I saw it, the first thing I thought of was like, it was kind of like it had the look of like, I guess, just generic fantasy stuff that we see on Netflix all the time.
Right.
Like there was nothing special about like the locations and stuff like that we saw like in the trailer. And that's kind of, because like when I think of Lord of the Rings, I think of like the plains of like Rohan and like the mountains in the background. And
we do see that one city that had the same statue. So
the Argonath, it should be the island city of Numenor is what people think. Like the ancestors to Gondor itself.
Yep.
But I mean, they don't last very long in terms of like transitioning into Gondor. So we'll see. But yeah, like the trailer, if someone who'd never watched something like The Witcher on Netflix, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, or what's another like fantasy genre TV show, whatever, just those 3. If you took screenshots from those 3 and like one of them was from the Rings of Power trailer, and you showed them to someone who had no idea what any of those things were, they wouldn't be able to pick out Lord of the Rings from the other two if they had watched the original movies versus looking at that trailer, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
So,
and I think it's such like, maybe I don't know what the rights is. I don't know where that stuff is sort of tangled up when you talk about the aesthetic of the Peter Jackson universe. But I get mobile game ads on my phone every fucking day of Lord of the Rings Conquest or whatever.
Yep.
And it's the same aesthetic as the Peter Jackson verse. So if that fucking company could get the rights, I'm sure Amazon could have pulled some strings to have those aesthetics in there. So I don't know.
And like, I think that's kind of, to me, that's the problem with Lord of the Rings, because Christopher's passed now. So like, and now it's just like run by the estate, but like, I'm assuming that there's a board of trustees. That's usually how it works. And it's just like, there's no like clear, I guess, like defined head, as opposed to like something like with like how like George R. Martin was to the two producers or the two showrunners for Game of Thrones, or that dude from Marvel. So like it's kind of like so like I think that's my problem with it, is just there's no like body, like there's no head that's kind of like running the show, or like has like a goal in mind what to do with, I guess, Lord of the Rings and that universe in general. So it's just kind of pumping out stuff whenever.
Yeah, it's a big risk to like make new content for an author who's passed.
Yeah.
Because if you bomb the show, like you're basically just shitting on their legacy. And that is pretty like disrespectful in terms of artistic process and stuff. So,
and it's twofold too, right? Because it's not just the written lore of Tolkien, it's also the Peter Jackson movies. So you're making a prequel to a movie that you're, by all accounts, not tied to. And you're also creating a time of something we've never seen directly told by Tolkien himself. So there's a lot of bad wiggle room in here where things can go very wrong, and to stay true to either one of those things, let alone both, is nearly impossible.
Well, I mean, we already see female dwarves without beards, which is like one strike right off the bat. Where it's like, guys, it's like mentioned in the movies themselves.
Yeah,
female dwarves have beards. We see female dwarves with beards in the Hobbit movies, so it's like, you had one job right off the bat, and you dropped it. So
and like, again, I think if there was no, like, if the trailer just didn't have Galadriel or Elrond and stuff like that, like and like all the characters that we already know, I think I would have a different view on it. But it's just, I don't know, I guess just I'm a little bit pessimistic about it. So
and I think it's weird too, right? Because we're not getting like Hugo Weaving back as Elrond, and I'm not suggesting that we should, but to market that character to, like the wider audience, to this aired at the Super Bowl, like it's just strange to me. Like, you think like someone would be like, that's Elrond, who's like not like us to Lord of the Rings. You know what I mean?
The first time I watched the trailer, I didn't know it was Elrond either.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, he doesn't really look that much like Elrond. So it's like,
and so for like the marketing, it's like, market this as like being a story in Middle Earth. Don't market this as, remember Galadriel? Because no, most people fucking don't. Like, it's just bizarre. I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I'll wait until another trailer comes out with a real kind of plot line going through it for me to have like a final judgment for it. But I mean, at the rate we're going here, it's just going to be another, hey, these are the characters that you liked 15 years ago, so we're going to just give you a backstory so that the casual audience is like, oh, I guess I know who this character is. I'll see the movie again, or I'll go see this character again. So just have faith and like take a risk in creating an original story with actual original characters. Like, we love that world of Middle Earth.
That's the thing, right?
We need to continuously throw back these characters again and again.
Like, The Hobbit isn't an interesting trilogy because it's Frodo's uncle. It's because it takes place in Middle Earth, and it's an interesting story in itself. You know what I mean? So it's like, even the parts that we get in that trilogy where we're going back to original characters, even though that wasn't present in the book, like those parts feel very like force fed in. Yeah. But I really want to love this show.
Me
So
too.
I'm like you, Matt. I'm withholding judgment until we get something a little juicier to bite into, and I'm still gonna watch it regardless.
Yeah, probably unless it really bombs inside the first like 4
unless it
episodes or
fucking
something.
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Will, what do you got for us today?
Well, originally my topic was like what makes or like what do you not like about certain things.
So we've been talking about for like 35 minutes at this point.
Yeah, so I'm gonna flip that, and I guess like what draws you into yeah, so like I'm just gonna call it an audible on this, and just I guess like what draws you into something, I guess like some sort of fantasy IP, like for example, like what made you like Lord of the Rings. So like for example, like for me, I'm always about like immersion. So this is like with books, games, movies, whatever. Like I have to be able to like picture myself in that world for me to actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
So and like that's why, like for example, like something like Skyrim, again, always mentioning it on this podcast, is
it's so good though. It's so
good. And because like what makes it good is that like I see myself as the character. I'm in the story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one who's making the decisions, and I make decisions in that world based off of like what I would do in real life,
right?
Or I guess also like what I would idealize and like what I would like to do in real life,
right?
So to me that's like a major thing, and like that's why I usually like a lot of like reboots and stuff like that I think fall short for me, just because I'm not immersed in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself like, I don't know, just like maybe not like I find it hard to like fit myself into the story. And again, one more time to rag on the Witcher series, it's just I find it hard for me to like, I don't know, insert myself into the story and feel, I guess, a part of the character cast and etc.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the games, The Witcher?
The Netflix series, I should say.
Netflix series, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm with you too, and I think like we've talked about this a little bit on the show, where like I was having the issue of like I can't really get into fantasy stories that are set in Earth and then have like, you know, there's always been magic in New York City. For me, like it's tougher. There's some, you know, stuff like Nine Tails that I've really enjoyed, and I'm starting to lose a little bit of that feeling towards stories like that. However, the reason why I'm more drawn to other stories that have world building built into, you know, the concept of the story they're telling is because of that immersion. I want to feel like I know what's going on in this world, or I feel like I'm a part of it, or the actions and the things that characters are speaking about, I understand because the world building is so dense that like there's really a lot to like pull apart. For me, I always talk about there's a specific moment in one of the behind the scenes Lord of the Rings things, and I think it's I can't remember who it's one of the writers or one of the consultants that translated Elvish, or somebody says this, but basically in those films you never get someone looking to camera and being like, this is pretty silly, isn't it, or some sort of fourth wall breaking, like, remember this is only a movie. And I feel like that's present in a lot of modern stuff, even like Marvel movies, because they take place in the theoretical Earth. You know, we get some of that. Oh, here's a topical thing we can all point and reference, and that reminds us this is just a movie. Whereas Lord of the Rings, everyone who's talking is deadly serious about the shit they're talking about. Even if you look at it from a pulled back perspective, it's like talking about fucking trolls and orcs and shit. It's fucking ridiculous, but everyone's deadly serious. And so then you're automatically immersed in it, because like when Elrond says these are the end of the days, you're like, fuck, what am I going to do about it? But you know, it's not your problem. You're just watching the film. And even the stuff like, again, always go back to the aesthetics of the Peter Jackson movies. When we're at like Amon Hen and Fellowship, and all the ruins for that matter, you know, Weathertop and Amon Sur, and anywhere we go sort of throughout the trilogy, everyone has something to say about it. Oh, these are the blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't just feel like exposition. It feels like, especially when you get like Aragorn looking up at what's those standing figures? Yeah.
Or something, yeah.
Like because he has a history of being a descendant of those people and that place. You hear it sort of in his voice and in the delivery of those lines, like he's looking at those things and longing for a time long past, and like you're immersed. You're like, damn, these things are like, they're not just giant statues. These are like representative of the world in like a bigger light. So for me, that's what draws me in, is that there's a history here, and the world only stops as far as you're willing to dive into it. And that's why I think, like you're saying earlier, Matt, like the written history of Tolkien, that's why it works, is because it's like people want more and more out of this story. And you can dig deeper back that way, but to push it forward for sequels and stuff, that's where you run into issues. But yeah, what about you, Matt?
Yeah, like I agree with what you say there, where the two main things that for me really will get me immersed and enjoy a series is history baked into the world building itself, and the ability to show stakes of like the events happening in the series itself. So like one of my favorite game series of all time is Mass Effect, and that game series does a brilliant job of letting you learn history as you play through. You learn about the contact war with the humans and the Turians once they finally have like full spacefaring ability. You learn about the Rachni War with the Krogan and the Rachni and the Rebellion and the Genophage, and it just goes on and on and on. And then on the flip side, it also does a great job of, you can make choices, and those choices can be based on a character you're trying to play or your own personality filtering through the main character that you built.
Right.
And then it does a good job of showing you the stakes and the outcomes of your choices as you go through the story. Another series I'm a really big fan of is pretty much anything written by Brandon Sanderson. So Cosmere, Stormlight Archive.
Right.
That's another series where it's completely removed from Earth, basically. Like the Stormlight Archive starts out with the Way of Kings, and the first like 400 pages is just, it's a bit slow, but it's literally just him having to lay out what the world looks like and feels like and acts like, because it's so different. And once you get through that, the rest of the series builds really tough, like strongly, because it's set on a foundation that he's like clearly planned out and laid out for you and explained. All the magic is based in like a hard science system. So explaining the magic in scientific terms, like in gravity and friction, makes sense from our world, but it's added a fantastical element onto it. So you're like, I can understand this thing that in theory has no place to exist on our planet.
Right.
So those are big things that I enjoy when I'm looking for a new series and like something that will draw me into something.
Yeah, like having that world that exists regardless of you being in it.
Yeah, it was there before you started playing or reading, and it'll be there after you started reading or playing.
And on top of that, just to piggyback off of that, it's the world was there before the story started. Like we're not started like with the exception of what you said about Brandon Sanderson, where he lays it out. Like something like Lord of the Rings, you're just jumping into this specific time point and to this specific time point, but the world goes on, and the world was here long before this story started. And when you feel that in the story, that's when like you're totally immersed.
Yeah. And like that's why I love The Witcher 3, but like I'm so leery about the Netflix version, kind of like, man, what the hell?
Yeah. Like Witcher 3, unreal. What a game. Like I played that for the first time when the pandemic started, so like just 2 years ago now, I guess. And within about 20 hours, I had to restart my entire game because I was like, I haven't done this correctly. Like I got hooked later in the game when I had been like speed running the main story, and I was like, wait a minute. There's a lot more that I just realized I haven't even like scratched the surface of that I need to go back and experience. And then I pumped like 140 hours into the game because it was like incredible. Just it was so immersive. It was so good.
Will, you're on your what playthrough of the game?
Actually, I just finished. I think it was the third.
Oh, okay. On the third separate system, right?
No, that's Skyrim.
It's for real. Skyrim on like 5 different systems. I can't stop.
Yeah,
I can't stop.
I'm the reason why there's no sequel, or Elder Scrolls 6 hasn't been released.
Bethesda makes their money off of us.
Yeah, you two suckers. I think maybe we're cracking the code on why video games aren't successful is because when you're no longer in control of that protagonist, the immersion is broken. and you're watching somebody else fuck up all the decisions you wouldn't have made in game.
Yeah, that's fair.
I guess that maybe not true when you talk about something like Mario Brothers, but
I mean, they might ruin that movie in their own way. So
yeah, totally.
Man.
Yeah, but even something like Assassin's Creed, where it's like, just like the feeling of someone else not doing things how you would do it, or not telling the story at the speed of which you would like it to see. Like you're saying, Matt, like you started the game over so you could experience more out of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you get a 2.5-hour movie trying to cram everything into it, you're like, this is not immersive at all. This feels like people trying to make a video game movie.
There was no movie.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't seen the Assassin's Creed movie, and as much as I like Michael Fassbender, I will not be watching the Assassin's Creed movie at any point in time.
That's for the best.
Yeah, and see a quick hot take on Assassin's Creed. That's why I like the last, I guess, trilogy that's come out, simply because
like Origins, Valhalla, and Odyssey.
Yeah, and mostly because like you have that agency where you can kind of sort of create a character. You can and there's like make choices.
Yeah, there's RPG elements in the games now. Like I remember playing through Odyssey, and like early on in the game, you get the choice of like, oh, this girl is supposedly cursed and she's sick and she's gonna like kill the whole village. So these like random thugs are like, we need to kill this whole family, and you walk up and you're like, I can either kill the family and like think that that's what's going to happen, or I can just think these guys are bullshitting me, kill the thugs, and then let them go free, and like the family can live. And I'm like, I'm not just going to murder this family because some random dudes told me that they were sick. And then like 3 hours later in the campaign, they're like, oh yeah, that village was wiped out, everyone died from the plague. And you're like, whoa, okay, damn, like holy shit.
Yeah. And see, like don't get me wrong, like the first 3 Assassin's Creed games are like, I love the stories to them, but I like the latest 3 the most, simply just because I can do whatever I want and maybe kill a family, or maybe just kill the home invaders or whatever.
I mean, I think Syndicate underrated. I loved Assassin's Creed Syndicate. Getting to play through London with like the grappling hook and stuff was cool. But I think I'm like 70 hours into Valhalla, and I really enjoy. The open world is maybe a little bit too big, but it does get pretty immersive. Like you can turn off the HUD and a bunch of the other elements in it, and you can just ride around and do stuff. I think that's something that Ghost of Tsushima did so well for me.
Yeah,
was that you had a really minimal HUD. There was no real map with markers on it. It was you're riding through this gorgeous scenery, and all of a sudden this yellow bird is like trying to lead you somewhere, and you follow it through the trees, and all of a sudden there's a sword for you to collect. Or you're on top of a mountain, you look out through the horizon and you see a smoke rising up from a village off in the distance, and you're like, oh, I should go check out what that is. It's just things that can give you a sense of exploration, but still find really unique ways to kind of focus you into certain things without like railroading you. Is a nice immersive feature that some things certainly lack and some things have.
I think there's the total opposite of that, something like God of War 4, right? Where it is a railroad, when again the D&D terms, where something like the new Assassin's Creed game, very sandbox, do what you want type of thing, like Zelda. But with God of War 4, you're on one path and you can't really deviate from that all too much. But because there's no cuts in that game, because everything is one fluid sort of scene, story being told, that's immersive as well. Like that for me was a game I never wanted to stop playing, because like I just kept wanting to get to the next thing, because it was so like immersive, and I felt like I was part of that story. Where it's like, it's the complete opposite of like the RPG sort of do whatever you want feel. But I feel like when games are not enough of one or not enough of the other, that's what it feels like. You can choose what you want to do after you get to this point in the game, and it's like then it feels like a video game.
Yeah, like that just really relies on a studio or a directing company or a writer like really dialing in and focusing and getting everyone on the same page with the kind of theme and feel they want. Because like the Halo games aren't known for their great open world, free for all gameplay. It's known for its fun story that builds through really climactic moments and has big set pieces that make you feel epic, and that's immersive in its own way. Where the open world games have the ability to just let you explore the world itself, So I think it's mainly the difference of a world design being your focus for open world and your narrative design for a single story.
Well said. Yeah. I also just want to bring up Senua's Sacrifice, and that was too immersive for me. The voices in your head and the headphones, I couldn't fucking do it.
Yeah, I haven't played that.
It's creepy. Really great game though. I ended up beating it not too long ago. But yeah, that's one that was too immersive.
Yeah, I find myself actually lately. I've been enjoying like I guess like game genres where it's like kind of like that first person, almost like survival horror almost.
Yeah.
Like Resident Evil, like the new ones were a lot of fun. Mostly terrifying to actually play, so I usually got someone else to do it. I would just like yell at them what to do. It was a thing. But like there's like a few others like Call of Cthulhu, like based off the board game, which is based off the short story / universe. Like I was playing that and it's like absolutely terrifying because like you're just hiding around with like a lantern and there's like weird freakish fish monsters coming after you and stuff.
I'm way too much of a baby for those kinds of games, man. I can't do like horror survival games.
Man, even me playing Skyrim sometimes, a little bit intoxicated, inebriated maybe, and going into like a Nord ruin, I'd be like, you hear the and you're like, fuck. You're so scared.
Battle music and you don't know where it's coming from.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man.
Well, yeah, I think that'll do it. Matt, thanks for joining the show today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me back on. Nice to meet you as well, Will.
Yeah, nice meeting you, Matt.
As always, people can check these episodes out every Tuesday. Check out for our Vox Machina review, the final one coming up this Friday, Saturday. And be prepared. We got some big thing coming, including the Dune Rumination, which is finally close to we're close. And some other things. Check out Collision that Will did with Joe last week. That was a fun episode. As always, I'm Matt.
I'm Will.
And I'm also Matt.
We are the Lords of Lore.